Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I didn't think a dumb tweet could ruin my life. At the time, I was just trying to blow off steam. My name's Eli Moreno. I was 22, working night shifts at a Dunkin' Donuts in Wexley, Indiana, a dead-end little town with barely any streetlights, let alone opportunities. My parents had passed away in a car crash 3 years prior, and I'd been living with my cousin Caleb in a dusty 2-bedroom apartment ever since. Caleb was barely around, working overtime as a warehouse loader. I paid my half of the rent by working 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week, making donuts and coffee for the occasional drunk or insomniac. I hated social media, but I still used it. It was like scratching an itch you didn't want anyone to see. Scrolling through TikTok and Instagram made me feel like everyone was either pretending or performing. Nothing was real. But I couldn't help it. That constant dopamine drip was addictive. The worst was Twitter. It was full of people trying to be clever, trying to go viral. One night, I made the mistake of posting something snarky. There was a thread trending: unpopular K-pop opinions. I scrolled past a bunch of predictable takes until I got annoyed enough to write, BTS is just boy band fast food for teenagers. Nothing original, just a shiny product. I thought it was dumb but harmless. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't even think anyone would see it. I put my phone down and went back to kneading dough in the back kitchen of Dunkin'. The fryer hissed behind me, the timer buzzing like a second heartbeat. I had other things to worry about. When I checked my phone during my 4 a.m. break, I had over 200 notifications. My stomach dropped. The tweet had blown up, for all the wrong reasons. People were furious. Thousands of angry replies. Some called me jealous. Some told me to kill myself. Some sent me pictures of raw meat with my face edited onto it. One person posted my profile picture with the caption, "Find him." I immediately locked my account. Then I deleted it. I assumed that would be the end of it. Just a digital fire. I could pretend it never happened. I was wrong. A week later, things had mostly gone back to normal. No one at Dunkin' said anything. Nobody I worked with seemed like the kind of person who paid attention to Twitter drama. There was Rachel, the shift manager in her 40s who was always tired and didn't care what anyone did as long as they didn't leave a mess. And there was Jamal, who mostly played music on his phone while stacking napkins. Then there was me. Quiet, on autopilot, doing my job and counting down the minutes till sunrise. I'd started using Omegle for the anonymity. I missed talking to people but didn't trust any platform where you could be hunted down by a fandom with military precision. Omegle felt low pressure. If someone was boring or weird, you just skipped. If they didn't like you, they skipped you. No harm done. That first night was actually fun. I talked to a college kid in Peru about horror movies. I met a girl from Denmark who showed me her art. One guy strummed a ukulele and sang me a lullaby. It was nice, but the second night changed everything. I was sitting on the break stool in the back of Dunkin', sipping on cold brew while the fryer bubbled lazily behind me. It was just past 3 a.m., the dead hour. I pulled out my cracked old laptop and opened Omegle. I'd typed in a few common interests: movies, books, coffee. The first few people skipped me quickly. One guy asked if I was high. Another tried to show me something nasty and got blocked. Then a new face loaded. She looked around my age. Maybe 21 or 22. Asian. She was in a pastel pink room with fairy lights hanging behind her and a huge white teddy bear in her lap. The walls were plastered with posters, BTS everywhere. She smiled politely. I smiled back. We started talking about favorite foods, then movies. I mentioned that I worked at Dunkin', and she asked what the weirdest customer I ever had was. I don't remember what I said. Something about a guy asking if we sold sushi. Then she tilted her head and said, "Wait, are you Eli? I'm 47? My blood turned to slush. That was my old Twitter handle. I hadn't used that name anywhere else, not even on Omegle. but something in her tone told me she wasn't guessing. I stammered. No? I don't know what you mean. Her smile dropped. She stared, cold, fixed, unblinking. I know what you said, she whispered. About them. My throat tightened. I hit skip so fast I almost knocked over my coffee. My heart was racing. How did she know? I hadn't used my real name, and I'd deleted the account. Could she have matched my face to that profile picture? Was there some AI tool they used to dox people? I slammed the laptop shut and tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just coincidence. Or a troll. But then I remembered something. I looked up at the wall behind me. A big laminated Wexley Tech Culinary School banner hung there, slightly in frame during my Omegle chats. If anyone paused the video, they'd see exactly where I worked, where I was. I didn't sleep that day. I kept checking the locks, peeking through the blinds, listening for sounds in the hallway. Nothing happened. Not yet. 3 nights later, I was working alone. Jamal had called out. Rachel left early with a migraine. Around 2:47 a.m., I was prepping a new batch of glaze when the front window shattered. A brick tumbled across the tile floor and slammed against the counter. I dropped the mixing bowl and ducked behind the register. My ears rang. When I peeked over the counter, the store was empty. I ran over and picked up the brick. On it scrawled in black Sharpie, BTS forever. I called the cops. They showed up half an hour later, took a statement, and shrugged. Could be kids, one of them said. You got any enemies? I didn't answer. The next night, a group of people showed up outside the Dunkin windows. They weren't ordering. They were dancing. A full synchronized routine to BTS. In the center of the group was the girl from Omegle. She didn't blink once as they danced. Her smile was robotic. Her eyes locked on me the entire time. At the end of the song, they all made a slashing motion across their throats. Then they walked away. I quit Omegle, deleted all my social apps, but it wasn't enough. Posters started appearing on telephone poles around campus. My face, side by side with the tweet. Red X's over my eyes. Then came the flash mobs. One in the campus cafeteria. Another outside my apartment building. Always the same group. Always the same girl. Campus security told me there was nothing they could do unless someone laid hands on me. So I bought pepper spray. I started wearing a BTS enamel pin everywhere I went. It felt pathetic, like carrying garlic around my neck. But it worked. For a while. Until one night, I woke up to the sound of scratching at my door. I didn't move. I just listened. The knob jiggled. Light whispers outside. Laughter. Then I heard it. The soft click of a lockpick. I shouted, "Go away." More laughter. I jumped out of bed, dragged my dresser in front of the door. The noise stopped. Then I heard a thud behind me. I turned. The back window was open. Figures climbed through one by one, silent, like shadows. 4 of them. They wore black hoodies. One had dyed pink hair. It was her. She stepped forward, holding a lighter, flicked it on. The flame danced inches from her face. "Say it," she whispered. I was shaking so hard I thought I'd pass out. I was wrong. I love BTS, I love their music. Their dancing is amazing. She smiled. They all climbed back out. I collapsed onto the floor and didn't move for hours. That was 3 months ago. No one's bothered me since. I still wear the pin. I still glance over my shoulder when I walk home from work. I don't talk about it anymore. I've learned my lesson. Don't mess with people who have more passion than boundaries, especially if they know where you live. I was 15 when it happened. Just a quiet sophomore at Halebridge High trying to blend into the background and keep my head down. I wasn't popular. I didn't play sports. And I definitely wasn't the kind of kid who got invited to big parties. My life mostly revolved around school, video games, and hanging out with a tight-knit trio of guys from my neighborhood, Ryan, Derek, and Leo. We all lived in a small suburban town called Ashwick, about an hour outside Boston. Ashwick was the kind of place where everything closed early, neighbors still waved from their driveways, and you could hear crickets at night if you stayed quiet enough. It was late October when it happened, the weekend before Halloween. The air had already gone cold and the trees were losing their leaves fast. That Friday night, our high school football team had a home game. None of us really cared about football, but it was something to do. The whole school went to those games, even if it was just to loiter behind the bleachers or sneak off somewhere with your friends. We walked to the game together that night. It was about a 30-minute walk from our neighborhood to the school. It was one of those brisk hoodie weather nights. You could see your breath, but it wasn't freezing. After the game, which we only watched for maybe 10 minutes, we didn't feel like going straight home. Leo was the one who suggested we hit the Dunkin' Donuts across town. It was the only one in Ashwick that stayed open 24/7, and it had become kind of a late-night hangout spot for high school kids. Our parents thought we were still at the game and none of us had strict curfews, so we figured, why not? It was about a mile out in the opposite direction of our homes, near the outskirts of town. We were a little wired from the cold and the caffeine we grabbed at the game, so we laughed and joked the whole way there. The Dunkin' sat next to an open lot and across from an old family-owned farm that always set up a corn maze every October. The maze was pretty famous around here. Boone's Farm Maze, it was called. They had hay rides and pumpkin patches for families during the day, but at night the place shut down completely. Or at least it was supposed to. That night something was off even before we stepped inside Dunkin'. There were no cars in the parking lot. Not even a single employee vehicle. The store lights were on inside, but no one was at the counter. We stood at the door a second, unsure if it was even open. Leo pulled the handle. It opened. He shrugged. Guess it's one of those nights where they're short-staffed. Maybe someone's in the back. We walked in. The bell above the door jingled, but no one came out. The coffee machines hummed. The donut display was fully stocked. Everything looked perfectly normal. But it was dead silent. Ryan called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Then he chuckled and said what we were all kind of thinking. "Dude, what if we're in a horror movie right now?" "Shut up," Derek said, clearly trying to act unbothered, but his voice betrayed a hint of unease. I felt it too. That strange, static buzz in the air, like something was just off. You know when your gut is trying to tell you something's wrong, but your brain is too focused on playing it cool in front of your friends? Leo leaned over the counter and shouted toward the back, "Yo! You guys open?" Still nothing. Then I noticed something. There was a red smear on the swinging door that led into the kitchen. Not huge, but noticeable. Like someone with a bloody hand had pushed through. My stomach flipped a little. "Guys," I said, pointing to it. They all went quiet. "Probably jelly," Leo muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. Derek shook his head. "Nah, man, I'm not feeling this. Let's go." But Leo, being Leo, couldn't leave well enough alone. "Let's check the maze out real quick. I've never seen it close this early. Maybe they left the gate open." I was about to protest, but Ryan had already started walking toward the fence across the road. "If it's locked, we'll go. Just 5 minutes." I don't know why I followed. Maybe it was peer pressure, or maybe part of me wanted to prove I wasn't a coward. But we all walked across the street, hopped the small wooden fence around Boone's farm, and headed toward the entrance of the corn maze. The gate was open. It was pitch dark inside, but a few solar lights lit up the wooden sign at the entrance. It still read, "Boone's Corn Maze. Last entry at 8:30 p.m. It was almost midnight. "Just to the first turn," I said, already regretting this. Leo grinned. "Scaredy cat." We decided to split up. Stupid, I know. Leo and Derek went left. Ryan and I went right. The corn was tall, easily 10 feet, and thick, brushing our shoulders as we walked. The path was mostly dirt, but a few hay bales were scattered around from the day's setup. We didn't talk much at first. It was eerily quiet except for the crunch of our shoes and the occasional breeze that made the stalks rustle. Then we heard it. Footsteps, not ours. At first, I thought maybe we were hearing Leo and Derek goofing off somewhere nearby. But it sounded too deliberate, too slow. Ryan stopped. "You hear that?" I nodded. The sound came from inside the corn, maybe 5 or 6 feet off the path. Crunch, crunch, crunch. "Leo?" Ryan called out. Silence. "I swear to God, if you guys are screwing around..." Crunch. Ryan grabbed my arm suddenly. "Look." I turned. In the dim glow of a nearby solar light, I saw the corn shifting. Slowly, methodically, like someone was pushing through it carefully, deliberately. Not rushing, not running, just moving. "Let's go," I whispered. We turned and started walking fast. Not running yet, but fast enough that the sound of our own footsteps masked everything else. Then we heard a voice. Low. Raspy. Male. "You're not supposed to be here." We froze. I couldn't even tell where it came from. It sounded like it was everywhere, or right behind us. My heart was thundering. Then came the worst part. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. On the path behind us. I turned, and I swear I wish I hadn't. A man stepped onto the path maybe 30 feet behind us. Not Leo, not Derek, someone else. He was tall, wearing a torn flannel and jeans. His face was partially in shadow, but I saw enough. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and he was smiling. He didn't say anything else, just walked. "Run!" I gasped. We sprinted. We didn't know where we were going, just deeper into the maze, turning randomly at intersections, hoping to lose him. But every time we slowed, we heard him. Crunch, crunch. Still walking. It was like he knew the maze better than we did, like he didn't have to run. At one point, we stopped to catch our breath. Stupid, I know. And Ryan turned to me, pale-faced. What if there's more than one of him? That thought nearly paralyzed me. Suddenly we heard Leo scream. A raw, terrified scream. Not playful, not messing around. We turned and ran toward the sound, crashing through the corn until we burst out onto another path. Leo was there, stumbling toward us, eyes wide. He grabbed Derek. He fucking grabbed him. We didn't wait. We just ran. Eventually, I don't even remember how, we saw the faint glow of the road beyond the fence. We sprinted for it, crashed through the last row of corn, and practically flew over the fence back into the street. None of us looked back. We didn't stop running until we were 3 blocks away, crouched behind a car in someone's driveway, gasping for breath. Derek never came out. We called the cops, told them what happened. They searched the maze that night, and the next day. They found nothing. No man, no blood, no Derek. But they did find one thing. A small clearing in the center of the maze, where the corn was flattened in a perfect circle. And in the middle of that circle, Derek's phone, smashed. The farm was shut down indefinitely. No more maze. No more Boone's Fall Festival. They never found Derek. His family moved away a few months later. The police ruled it as a runaway case. But I know better. We all do. Something, or someone, was in that maze. Watching. Waiting. And I still can't walk by a Dunkin' Donuts at night without feeling that same chill crawl up my spine. I was never a morning person. That's important to know before anything else. I'm not one of those people who wakes up at 5 a.m. to do yoga or drink green smoothies. My mornings were always a frantic mix of dry shampoo, mismatched socks, and black coffee. But life doesn't care about preferences, especially when you're barely scraping by in a city like Ashbourne. My name is Karina Mercer. I'm 27. I live in a small basement apartment on the edge of Ashbourne's west side, technically a city, but it's really more like a collection of old neighborhoods stitched together with cracked roads and unfinished developments. I work the opening shift at a Dunkin' Donuts located just off Crescent Boulevard. The store opens at 6 a.m., which means I usually leave my place around 5:20. The walk takes about 30 minutes. Normally, I cut through a patch of woods that sits between the residential streets and the commercial strip. It's technically part of Ashbourne Park, but no one really calls it that. It's just the woods behind Dunkin. Now, I know that sounds dumb. A woman walking through the woods before dawn? Every red flag, right? But this wasn't a deep, dark forest or anything. It was a narrow path lined with trash and cigarette butts. It always felt more forgotten than dangerous. And truthfully, it cut 10 minutes off my commute. That meant 10 more minutes of sleep. I'd been taking that shortcut almost every shift since I started there nearly a year ago, until one morning last fall. It was November 3rd. I remember because I'd just changed the calendar on the fridge the night before. The clocks had gone back the previous weekend, so it was still completely dark out when I left. I threw on my usual oversized hoodie, stuffed my hair under a beanie, and headed out the door with my earbuds in. I always listened to the same morning playlist, mostly low-key stuff to keep me moving without waking me up too much. I walked past the usual silent houses, the motion-activated porch lights blinking on as I passed. The air was cold enough to bite, and I remember being annoyed that I hadn't brought gloves. I stuck my hands into my hoodie pockets and ducked my head against the wind. As usual, I cut through the chain-link opening behind Melton Street and entered the woods. That's when the first odd thing happened. I took one earbud out. I do that sometimes in the woods, partly to hear if anyone's nearby, partly because the rustling of trees can be oddly calming. That morning it felt still. Too still. I remember thinking, no squirrels, no wind. There were always animals in there, always. But that morning, nothing. Just the faint sound of my boots crunching gravel. Even the traffic from the boulevard felt muffled, like I was walking through a sealed-off bubble. I told myself I was being dramatic, just tired, cold, irritated with myself for not bringing gloves. I was about 5 minutes into the woods when I felt it. That strange, ancient sensation of being watched. I stopped, pulled out my other earbud, turned slowly. Nothing behind me, no one on the path, no rustling in the trees. But I swear, I felt it, like heat on the back of my neck. Something or someone was watching me. I turned back around and walked faster. Told myself I'd skip the woods tomorrow. I even laughed a little, shaking it off. Then I heard the footsteps. At first, they matched my own, one beat behind, like an echo. But then they didn't. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again, this time more slowly, listening carefully. The steps continued. They were real, and they weren't mine. I looked over my shoulder. Again. Nothing. The path behind me was empty. I don't carry a weapon. Never needed to. But I did have a small canister of pepper spray in my purse, a gift from my sister last Christmas. I slipped my hand into my bag and curled my fingers around it. I didn't stop walking. I told myself, it's probably a jogger. Maybe someone who just entered the woods from the other side. Maybe someone harmless. But then why couldn't I see them? Why were they always just far enough behind that I could hear them but never see them? About 2 minutes from the end of the path, right before the woods open up to the plaza, I passed the old wooden bench. It's rotted and splintered, half covered in moss. No one sits there. Except someone was. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something sitting on it, a figure, hunched over. I blinked, looked again. Nothing, just a bench. I kept walking, faster now. The footsteps behind me quickened too. I finally broke into a jog. The path curved, leading to the opening in the trees where the Dunkin sign glowed faintly in the distance. My breath puffed white in front of me. I clutched my spray tighter, and then something grabbed my shoulder. It wasn't light. It wasn't a leaf or a falling branch. It was a firm, unmistakable grip. I spun around, raising the pepper spray, heart hammering. No one was there. I mean, no one. The path behind me was empty. The trees were still. Not a single sound. I stood there, stunned, panting, unable to move. The feeling of that hand lingered on my shoulder like ice. I stayed frozen for what felt like a full minute. And then, without really thinking, I ran the rest of the way out of the woods. Full sprint, no earbuds, no music. I didn't stop until I was standing behind the Dunkin building, clutching the back door handle with shaking hands. I didn't tell anyone that day. What was I supposed to say? That the wind grabbed me? That I imagined footsteps for 10 straight minutes? I worked my shift like normal, smiling, serving bagels, pretending everything was fine. But I didn't walk home through the woods that night, and I never walked through them again. The next morning I took the long route, 2 extra blocks of sidewalk and a cracked overpass. It was better lit, more public. But even then I kept turning around every few minutes, listening for footsteps that never came. A few days later, I broke down and told my coworker, Jace. He didn't laugh. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, don't go through those woods." My cousin saw something weird there too. I pressed him. What did his cousin see? He shrugged. Said there was a man that followed her, but not like normal. Said he didn't walk right. Said she looked behind and he was standing still but closer every time. She said he was barefoot, in the snow. I asked when this happened. Last winter, he said. She only told me once, then never again. I started asking around. Quietly. Other employees, a delivery driver, even the manager. The stories were all different. A woman heard someone whisper her name. A guy said he saw a kid standing motionless on the bench at 5 a.m. Someone else said they saw a shadow in the trees that didn't move with the wind. One thing was always the same. It always happened early. It always happened alone. And no one ever went back a second time. That bench. I still think about it. The glimpse of that figure. The hand on my shoulder. The way it felt personal. Not random. Not just some urban creep. Like something knew me. Had waited for me. I moved apartments 2 months later. Closer to work. I don't walk much anymore. But sometimes, when I close the Dunkin at night and step out the back to take the trash, I look toward the woods. And even though I can't see the bench from there, I swear, sometimes I feel like something is sitting on it, waiting. I never used to believe in the idea that evil could hide in plain sight. Not until I started working the night shift at a 24-hour Dunkin' Donuts off Route 118 in Maple Hollow, Illinois. It's a small town no one really hears about, the kind of place where truckers pull off for gas and coffee and where half the buildings are boarded up or under construction that never ends. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 23. And a few months ago, I was just trying to stack enough paychecks to put myself through community college. I'd moved in with my older cousin, Dana. She was 36, worked for the county registrar, and after my mom passed away from ovarian cancer, she was the only family I had left who actually picked up the phone. We weren't close, not really, but she gave me a room in her house, rent-free, and told me I could stay as long as I kept out of trouble and paid for my own food. Fair enough. So I took the graveyard shift at the Dunkin' on Ridge Avenue, midnight to 8 a.m., 5 nights a week. It was an easy gig for the most part, dead quiet between 2 a.m. and 4. The regulars were easy to predict. A security guard from the warehouse district who always bought 2 Boston creams and a black coffee. An old man named Clyde, who smelled like gasoline and said barely 5 words. And then there was the usual trickle of exhausted nurses, half-drunk couples, and truckers with twitchy eyes and nowhere else to go. I'd been there about 3 months when the weirdness started. Not loud or dramatic, just a quiet shift in tone, like the hum of the cooler was suddenly too loud, or the fluorescents flickered a little longer than they used to. Stuff you'd shrug off if you weren't alone every night. The first time I saw her, I was refilling the donut tray near the window. It was close to 3:10 a.m. I remember the time because I'd just changed the in-store radio and was watching the minute digits roll. That's when I caught her reflection in the glass. A woman, standing outside. Pale. Long, stringy hair. Her face was just blank, like a wax doll left in the sun too long. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there. I turned around. No one. It wasn't until the 3rd night in a row of seeing her that I started to get uneasy. Each time she stood in a slightly different place, always outside, never entering, and always just before or after 3 a.m. When I asked my coworker Dave, who worked the evening shift before me, he shrugged. Man, you're just sleep deprived. That lot brings out all kinds of loons. Long as she don't come in here with a gun or a knife, let her stare. I tried laughing it off, but that same night, I was mopping the floor when I saw a stray cat walk in through the back door. A small white one, so filthy it looked gray in some places. I figured it was freezing outside, so I poured a little milk in a cup and set it by the corner. The cat approached slowly, like it had been hurt before, then drank the milk and sat right next to my stool while I counted the till. She stayed with me the entire shift, curled up under the counter. After some hesitation, I brought her home. Dana wasn't thrilled. "Aren't stray cats covered in fleas?" she asked, standing with her arms crossed. "I'll take her to the vet tomorrow. She's clean now, I swear. She's sweet." I looked down at the cat, now licking her paw silently on the carpet. Dana scowled. "She gives me the creeps." "What? She hasn't even moved." "Exactly," she muttered before walking off. I named the cat Marshmallow. I don't know why. It just felt right, and honestly, she helped. Coming home to that little purr ball made things feel less heavy. It was a comfort I didn't know I needed. But Dana, she never warmed up to her. I caught her more than once standing in the hallway, just watching the cat from a distance, like she was trying to figure something out. "She watches me," Dana said once, "even when I sleep." Cats do that. They're curious. "No, Marcus, she's calculating." That was Dana. Always intense, always a little high-strung. I figured she'd come around eventually, but the next few days would prove me wrong. It was a Wednesday morning when things shifted for real. I came home from my shift, bone-tired, and found Dana's car still in the driveway. Odd, because she always left by 7:30. Inside, the house was silent. Too silent. No kitchen sounds, no news playing from the TV. I checked the living room. Empty. Kitchen, untouched. "Dana?" I called. Nothing. I approached her bedroom door. It was closed. That wasn't strange in itself, but Dana never shut her door completely. She hated the lack of airflow. I knocked once. "Dana? You all right?" No answer. I knocked harder. "Dana, it's me. You okay?" Nothing. A chill settled in my spine. I tried the doorknob. Locked. She never locked it. I mean, never. Panic started rising in my throat. I didn't want to force the door, but something told me I had to. I grabbed the screwdriver set from under the kitchen sink and jimmied the lock. Took me a solid 4 minutes. When the door finally gave way, the smell hit me first. Not rot, not blood, but something stale, thick, like a basement after a flood. Dana was in bed under the covers, but frozen. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth slightly agape, and her body was stiff like a mannequin. Her skin looked clammy. "Dana!" I shouted, rushing forward. Her chest rose and fell shallowly. She was breathing, but she wasn't responding. And there, at the foot of the bed, sat Marshmallow. Calm. Watching. I dialed 911 with shaking hands. Paramedics arrived within 15 minutes. The moment they started to lift her, Dana gasped violently like someone had popped her up from underwater. She coughed, eyes darting around the room, confused. "What happened?" she whispered. "We were hoping you could tell us," a medic replied. They checked her vitals. Everything normal. She refused to go to the hospital. Insisted she just fainted. I tried to push her. "Dana, you locked your door. You never lock your door. And you looked dead." "I don't remember," she said softly, holding her arms like she was cold. But something was heavy. 2 nights later, I had my first day off in weeks. Dana seemed okay. Tired, but okay. We watched a movie together, The Shining, her pick, ironically, and she went to bed around midnight. I crashed an hour later. But around 3 a.m. I woke up suddenly. The air felt wrong, and someone was in my bed. I turned over fast and saw Dana lying next to me, eyes wide open, smiling faintly. "What the hell?" I yelped, stumbling out of bed. "I just wanted to be near you," she said slowly. "You're kind. Software you made me milk. You took me in." "What are you talking about?" She sat up. Her head tilted unnaturally. "I'm not Dana," she said calmly. My heart dropped into my stomach. "What?" "You gave me warmth when I had none. I was cold, hungry, weak. You let me in. Is this some kind of joke?" "No." Her smile faded. Dana was dying inside, cracking. She left space. I took it. I backed toward the door. "You're insane," I said. "I'm calling someone." "I'm not insane, Marcus." Her voice grew flat. "I'm something older than insanity. You wouldn't understand." And then she raised her left hand and I felt everything in me seize. My limbs stopped responding. My voice locked in my throat. I was paralyzed, stuck mid-step. "Sleep now," she whispered. "Sleep." And the world went black. I woke up in my bed, alone. Morning sun poured through the window. Dana was gone. No note, no phone, no car. I called the police, filed a missing persons report. They took it seriously at first, asked about mental health, history of drug use. I told them everything. Left out the paralysis part. Left out, "I'm not Dana." A few days later, I hired a private investigator. Her name was Rhea. She was former law enforcement, sharp as hell. After a week, she called me. "I pulled phone records, Marcus. Dana hasn't used her phone since Wednesday. Her car's plates were pinged once near Brookfield, but that's it." "And the house?" I asked. "Anything odd?" "Just one thing," she said. "Your house's security cam caught something odd Thursday night. Around 2:57 a.m., she sent me the footage. I watched it alone, heart racing. It was grainy but clear enough. Dana, or something wearing her shape, walked out the front door barefoot, cradling Marshmallow in her arms. She looked up at the camera and smiled, then walked off into the woods behind our property. Neither of them were ever seen again. It's been 7 months. I still work night shifts, but not at Dunkin anymore. I switched towns, new job, new faces. But sometimes at 3 a.m. I catch a glimpse of something white moving just outside the window. Not quite human, not quite animal. Just watching, waiting. And deep down I wonder, did I invite it in? I was 8 the year it happened. Still too young to process real fear, but just old enough for something like that to stick with me forever. We had just moved to a quiet suburban town called Maple Hollow in upstate New York, a little colder than where we came from. The houses here were all close together, with neatly trimmed hedges and porches decorated with hay bales and plastic skeletons during Halloween. My parents thought it would be safer for my sister and me. They were wrong. My mom had gotten a part-time job at the Dunkin' Donuts right outside town, maybe a 10-minute drive down Hillridge Avenue. The shop was small but always warm, with that sweet smell of sugar, grease, and coffee that hung thick in the air. On weekends, I'd sit at the back with a donut and my Nintendo while she worked morning shifts. My little sister, Ava, would usually be home with Dad. But during the week, it was different. She picked up evening shifts, often returning home just before bedtime. That year, Halloween landed on a Sunday. 2 days earlier, Friday evening, we decided to carve our pumpkins. It was kind of a tradition. Mom had picked up 3 huge pumpkins from the farmer's market after her shift. We cleared the table in the kitchen, pulled out the old carving kit, and set to work. I made mine look like it had a jagged smile and sharp eyes, classic, creepy, and mean-looking. Ava, who was only 6, gave hers a crooked smile and triangle eyes. It looked goofy and sweet, just like her. "Yours looks like it eats kids," she told me. "Yeah, yours looks like it works at a bank," I shot back. She laughed and Mom chuckled from the kitchen where she was packing donuts she brought home for Dad. It was around 8:30 p.m. when we finished. I remember because Jeopardy had just started on TV in the living room. Mom told us we could set the pumpkins outside before getting ready for bed. We opened the front door, and that's when we saw him. A man, standing completely still at the edge of our driveway, just past the tree line where the light from the porch didn't quite reach. He wasn't moving, but he wasn't frozen either. More like waiting. He was wearing dark clothes, not black, more like muddy brown, and a beanie. His shoulders looked slouched, and he wasn't tall, maybe just a few inches taller than Mom. He had something in his hands, I think. A bag? I couldn't really tell. I grabbed Ava's arm and stopped her before she could take another step. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't say anything. I was staring at him, but the second he realized we were there, he moved. But instead of walking back down the driveway toward the street like you'd expect, he turned and ran fast toward the side of the house, right where our garage sat behind the hedge. Ava screamed. Not loud, but enough for it to get Mom's attention. We ran inside, slamming the door shut, Ava's pumpkin still in her hands. "What happened?" Mom asked, coming into the foyer, donut box still in her hand. "There was a man in the driveway. He ran around the house." Mom's face shifted instantly. She called Dad, who was in the basement working on something, and he came up with a flashlight and a jacket and went out through the garage. We all waited. 10 minutes passed. When he came back in, he looked irritated, not scared. I walked all around. No one's out there, probably just some teenager messing around. Mom didn't look convinced, but she tried to smile for our sake. "Come on, let's set your pumpkins down and lock up for the night." We put mine on the left side of the steps. Ava placed hers next to it, like a little brother leaning against his older sibling. That night I didn't sleep well. I kept picturing that man standing in the shadows, just beyond the reach of our porch light, watching. The next morning was cold. When I came downstairs, my mom was on the phone with the police. She wasn't yelling, but her tone was sharp, scared. "What happened?" I asked. She motioned for me to wait. Dad walked into the room, rubbing the back of his neck. "Someone smashed the back window," he said. "Basement door's been kicked in. Nothing's missing, though, just damage." "What about the pumpkins?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. He sighed and nodded toward the front window. I walked over and peeked through the blinds. Both pumpkins were smashed, not just dropped and cracked, but obliterated, smeared across the concrete in pieces. The police came, and I had to tell them what I saw. Ava did too. She couldn't stop crying. She clutched her stuffed turtle the whole time. "They probably just wanted to scare you kids," the officer said. "Halloween brings out the weirdos. Keep your doors locked. Call us if anything happens again." That was it. No one was caught. No one followed up. By Sunday, actual Halloween, we didn't even hand out candy. Dad said he wasn't in the mood. Ava had nightmares for weeks. Mom started driving to and from work with the doors locked and pepper spray in her purse. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came a week later. It was a normal Tuesday evening. Mom had a closing shift at Dunkin. Dad was helping Ava with her homework, and I was upstairs in my room. At 9:20 p.m., the doorbell rang. I was closest, so I yelled, "I got it!" When I opened the door, there was no one there. But on the porch, sitting exactly where my pumpkin used to be, was a new one. Perfectly round. No carving, no stem. Just a pumpkin. I stared at it. Then I noticed the note taped to the front door. It was made of napkin paper, the kind from Dunkin, and it had something written in red ink. "Yours smiled." That's why I left it for last. I screamed so loud Dad thought I fell down the stairs. He ran over, read the note, then pulled Ava away from the living room window. We called the police again. This time they took it seriously. Sort of. They dusted the pumpkin for prints, took the note, said they'd talk to the manager at Dunkin, but they never found out who left it. They never explained how someone knew where Mom worked, or why he left that note about Ava's pumpkin, the smiling one. That night, Dad put a hammer by his bed. Mom slept on the floor in Ava's room, and I stayed awake until the sun came up. It's been almost 20 years. We moved 2 months after that incident, changed our number. Dad got a new job in a different county. Ava stopped carving pumpkins altogether. She doesn't even decorate her porch during Halloween. But every October I think about that man in the driveway, the way he stared, the way he ran, not away, but toward our home. And the note. Yours smiled. Now every Halloween I sit on my porch, fully lit, blinds open, and I don't carve pumpkins anymore. Not because I'm scared, because I know one year he might leave another one, just to remind me he's still out there. I never thought a box of donuts would be the reason I survived. For context, I'm 29 years old. My name's Evan Chase. I worked, in accounting at a small tech firm in a suburb just outside of Portland, Oregon. The firm's called Kelton and Weaver, and I had been there for about 3 months when everything happened. It wasn't a great job, but it paid decent and the hours were manageable. My supervisor, Denise, was fair, but my actual manager, Eric, was the type of guy who reminded you weekly how replaceable you were. He wasn't subtle about it either. I'd been late to work twice in my first couple months, and Eric had already pulled me aside for a 25-minute lecture about commitment and punctuality. I got the message. So when I was running behind that Friday morning, I could already feel the weight of his judgment suffocating me. That day wasn't just any day. It was my turn to bring breakfast. Office tradition. Friday mornings meant someone brought donuts or bagels or whatever from a nearby shop, and everyone gathered around the break room counter for 10 minutes of small talk before disappearing into Excel spreadsheets and muted Zoom calls. It was supposed to be my redemption, a small way to win back some goodwill. I even got up early for it, but traffic had other plans. I'd slept through my first alarm, and by the time I showered, changed, and got to my car, it was already 7:52. I needed to be at the office by 8:30 sharp, and the nearest Dunkin' Donuts was 15 minutes away without traffic. I told myself it was fine. I'd just order quickly, skip coffee, and sprint to the office. I even rehearsed my donut order in my head on the drive. 2 dozen mixed, mostly glazed, a few jelly-filled for Donna. She loved those. And no coconut ones because Denise had some sort of allergy. I got to the Dunkin' at 8:08, tight but manageable. That's when things started going sideways. The line was long, about 8 or 9 people, and it was moving painfully slow. The first few customers went quickly, but then the man in front of me stepped up to order. He was tall, mid-50s maybe, with thinning hair and a navy blue puffer jacket. Nothing strange at first, but once he reached the counter, he just stood there. "Let's see," he muttered. "Do you guys still have those cream cheese croissant things?" The girl behind the counter, a teenager, maybe 18, tired eyes and a ponytail, nodded. "Yeah, we've got a few." He mumbled. "And, are the hash browns fresh?" "Same batch from this morning." Right. And the apple fritters, still warm?" I felt my anxiety flare. I checked my phone. 8:13. "Come on, man," I whispered under my breath. He glanced at the menu again. "Do you have the cinnamon twist today?" The girl turned and checked the case. "We have one left." "I'll take that." "No, wait. Actually, what's the thing with the maple frosting again?" I couldn't take it anymore. I leaned slightly forward and whispered, "Hey, sorry, but could you maybe hurry up a bit? I'm running late for work." He turned to me slowly. His face was blank at first, but his eyes narrowed just a bit. "Then you should have gotten here earlier," he muttered. I clenched my jaw. "I just need a couple dozen donuts for my office. I'll be out of here in less than a minute." He turned back to the counter. "Yeah, well, I was here first." The girl behind the register glanced at me with an apologetic shrug, then back at the man. He finally ordered 3 donuts and a coffee. I sighed in relief, but it was short-lived. He pulled out a plastic bag full of coins. Coins. "I've got it all in quarters," he said proudly. I watched, dumbfounded, as he started counting, 1 quarter at a time. 1, 2, 3. I looked at the girl again. She looked exhausted. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled a $10 bill from my wallet and held it out. "Please, just let me pay for his stuff." The man looked at me surprised. "You don't have to. Please." He nodded and stepped aside, muttering something under his breath that I didn't catch. I rattled off my order as fast as I could. The girl boxed up the donuts quickly, 2 dozen, all fresh, even tossed in a couple of bonus crullers, and I handed over my card. Just as she gave me my receipt, I turned to leave and heard something I'll never forget. The girl muttered something. I wasn't sure I heard her right. "Excuse me?" I asked. She looked up and smiled, too wide. It was cold, hollow. Her eyes were empty. I said, "I hate you all." I blinked. "What?" She smiled again. "Have a great day." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out. When I got to my car, I was about to back out when I noticed the man, the coin guy, was still parked in front of me. His car was blocking the exit. I honked. No movement. I waited. 2 more honks. Nothing. Annoyed, I stepped out of my car and walked up to his driver's side window. His head was slumped forward, resting on the steering wheel. "Hey," I called. No reaction. "Sir?" I knocked on the window. Still nothing. A sick feeling crawled into my stomach. I opened the door. The man's body slumped sideways, limp. His skin was flushed red and his eyes were glassy. His tongue hung out of his mouth and flecks of powdered sugar dotted his lips. He was dead. I froze. My stomach twisted. I looked around the lot. No one was near. Then his foot slipped off the brake. His car started to roll forward, slow at first, then gaining speed. I shouted, tried to stop it, but it was too late. The car coasted into the main road and clipped the back end of a passing SUV before crashing into a traffic pole. Glass shattered. Horns blared. I stood there, helpless, donuts in hand. Something was wrong. Really wrong. I ran back to the Dunkin, pushing open the front door. The girl was gone. I circled around the side of the building and saw the back door swinging open. I stepped in. The real worker, a middle-aged man in a brown Dunkin uniform, was lying face down in the kitchen, motionless. I checked for a pulse. Nothing. His skin was cold. A white powder covered his shirt and collar. That girl, she wasn't a real employee. She had done something. Poisoned the donuts. My donuts. I sprinted back outside, yanked open my car door and threw the boxes onto the ground. My hands were shaking. I fumbled for my phone and called 911. "Emergency services, what's your location?" I told them everything. The coin man, the crash, the girl, the poisoned donuts. They said someone would be there in 5 minutes. Then I called Eric, my manager. He picked up after 2 rings. "Where are you?" "There's been an emergency," I said, trying to stay calm. "Someone just died at the Dunkin' I was at. The donuts might have been poisoned. You're late again, Evan." "I just watched someone die, Eric. I'm not coming in." "I don't care. You were already on thin ice. Consider this your last day." I hung up. Police arrived. Then an ambulance. Then more questions than I had answers for. The medical examiner confirmed it. Cyanide. Traces found in the frosting. Surveillance footage was spotty. Someone had unplugged the back cameras. No one knew who the girl was. She hadn't been an employee. No trace of her in any system. She just walked in, put on a uniform, poisoned the donuts, and disappeared. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. Not because I lost my job, but because I realized how close I came to killing my coworkers. If that man, if he hadn't taken so long to order, hadn't eaten one of the poisoned donuts first, I would have delivered them to the office, and they would have eaten them. All of them. I still don't know who she was, or why she did it. All I know is, sometimes the people who annoy us the most might be the only reason we're still alive. I used to think nothing truly strange could happen in a place that smelled like glazed donuts and burnt coffee. For 2 years, I worked the night shift at a Dunkin tucked between the worn Appalachian foothills of a quiet Tennessee town called Cold Branch. It's the kind of place you drive through on the way to Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge without realizing it's even a town. 1 gas station, 2 churches, and our Dunkin. That's Cold Branch. I'm 24 now, but this happened just before my 22nd birthday. I dropped out of college and moved back in with my mom after my dad passed from a sudden heart attack. She was never the same after that. Quiet, jittery, and always waiting up for me no matter how late I got home. We lived in a little double-wide trailer at the base of one of the Smoky Mountain ridges, just 20 minutes from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That whole winter, there were stories in town, people going missing on the trails, hikers showing up days later barefoot and confused. But that was mountain stuff, you know? I worked at a donut shop. What did I have to be afraid of? Back then, the Cold Branch Dunkin was open 24 hours. The night shift was mine, midnight to 8 a.m., 5 nights a week. It wasn't a bad gig. Most nights were quiet, just truckers passing through or a couple of high school kids sneaking out. I'd clean the fryers, refill the glaze tanks, maybe sneak a few jelly sticks if no one was looking. It was peaceful. Until December 27th, 2022. I remember that date clearly because the roads were icy, and the snow from Christmas Eve still hadn't melted. The tourists were everywhere that week, what the locals called Hell Week, so I'd been picking up extra shifts to help out. That night started like any other. The town was dead quiet. Around 12:45 a.m., a light snow started to fall, the kind that sparkled under the parking lot lights like someone had sprinkled glitter across the asphalt. I was wiping down the counter when the door chime dinged. A girl walked in. Now, I've seen my share of weird night customers. Barefoot meth heads, deer hunters in full camo, even a guy once came in wearing nothing but a towel and a gas station visor. But this girl, she made the air feel wrong. She looked maybe 15 or 16, thin, pale, wearing a thin gray hoodie and jeans soaked to the knees. Her shoes were white Keds, the kind no one in their right mind wears in the middle of winter, let alone during a snowstorm. She wasn't shivering. That's what I remember the most. Her hair looked damp, like she'd been walking for miles, and her eyes, man, her eyes were just blank, like fogged-up glass. I gave her my usual awkward smile. "Hey there, cold out, huh? What can I get started for you?" She didn't say anything. Just walked right up to the counter and stared at the display case like she was trying to remember what food was. I glanced at the security cam feed above the register. She'd tracked snow in, but I didn't hear a car pull up. No footprints in the snow out front either. Just hers, barely there. "You all right?" I asked, starting to feel my throat tighten a little. She looked up at me, but it wasn't like eye contact. More like she was staring past me. Her lips moved. No sound. Then she finally whispered, "He's coming down the mountain." The words sent a chill straight through my chest. I blinked. What was that? She turned and walked to the booth in the corner, the one by the window that looks out toward the hills. The lights from the street lamps cast long shadows out there, but I could still see the edge of the tree line. Nothing unusual. Just the quiet woods. I didn't know what to do. I figured maybe she'd been separated from her family, or had wandered away from some cabin. She needed help. So I stepped out from behind the counter with a warm cruller and a napkin. "Hey," I said gently. "You hungry? This one's fresh." She didn't look at me. She just pointed toward the woods. I looked out. Something was moving between the trees. Not a deer, not a bear. Something upright. My brain did that thing where it tries to rationalize. Maybe a lost hiker. Maybe someone out night walking. But then it moved again. And it was fast. Too fast. It darted between trees like it didn't care about making noise or being seen. Its movement was jerky, unnatural, almost glitchy, like a corrupted video file. "Are you being followed?" I asked the girl. She slowly turned her head toward me, her lips quivering now. "He never left." "What do you mean?" "I was with my brother," she whispered. "We went hiking. 3 days ago, I ran. I didn't look back." My stomach dropped. "There was no girl reported missing," I said aloud, mostly to myself. The local sheriff's department had been in for coffee that very morning. They would have said something. "Are you from Cold Branch?" I asked, more carefully now. She stood up, still staring out the window. And that's when the lights flickered, not just inside. Every single light in the parking lot blinked, twice. I looked up. The buzzing fluorescent signs dimmed. The Dunkin logo on the roadside sign stuttered and died. Darkness settled like a suffocating blanket. I ran behind the counter, heart pounding, and grabbed my phone to call 911. But there was no signal, not even Wi-Fi. The router lights were all dead. I looked at the CCTV again. The camera facing the parking lot showed a tall, thin shape standing just beyond the reach of the snow glow. It looked wrong, not like a man. Too tall. Its arms hung low like it was built for crawling. No distinct face, just a long, pale head, tilted slightly like it was listening. The girl backed into the corner booth again, breathing hard now. "He waits for the ones who run," she said. I shouldn't have come here. I could feel something inside me starting to crack, a primal kind of fear. My eyes darted from the screen to the window, but there was nothing there now, just empty snow. "Okay," I said, swallowing hard. "We need to go. You need help." "I can't go back out there." "You don't have to. Just come to the office. Lock the door behind us." I led her into the small storage office in the back. Locked the door. The cameras were still running on backup power. That's when I saw it again. It was inside. Camera 3, the front counter. The shape was just there. Thin. Twisted. Its arms dragged against the tile as it walked slowly through the store, head turning toward the booths. The girl started crying silently, hands pressed over her ears. "It never leaves the mountains," she whispered. "But sometimes people bring it down with them." The feed on camera 3 cut to static. Something slammed against the office door. Once. Twice. A long, scraping sound followed, like fingernails on wood, but impossibly long. Too deep, too deliberate. I felt cold. Not surface-level cold, but the kind that seeps into your bones. And then... nothing. It stopped. The store went silent. I didn't open the door until sunrise. When I did, the Dunkin was spotless, no tracks, no marks, no girl. I called the police, reported what I thought had happened. They searched the woods. Nothing. No girl missing. No recent hikers reported in the Cold Branch area. The cameras, all wiped. Static after midnight. They thought I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, stress, grief, whatever. I quit that job 2 weeks later. The Dunkin closed that following year. The building's still there. Abandoned now, windows boarded up. People say it's haunted. Teenagers break in sometimes, dare each other to stay until midnight. They don't know what waits just beyond the trees. But I do. Every time I see snow dusting the edge of the Smokies, I remember that face I never saw. And the girl who was never reported missing. Sometimes I still drive by that old store. And once, just once, I swear I saw faint tracks in the snow leading from the woods to the front door. I was just trying to make rent, working at Dunkin' Donuts. What happened that rainy morning still haunts me. My name's Isaac Moreno. I was 24 years old at the time, trying to keep myself afloat after dropping out of college. I'd moved to a small town in Illinois called Bridgeley Hollow after a pretty painful breakup, and I was living in a dingy upstairs apartment above a nail salon that always smelled like acetone and mildew. Rent was cheap, and the landlord never came around, which was good because I was barely scraping by. I took a night shift job at a 24-hour Dunkin' Donuts just off County Road 19, tucked beside a half-abandoned strip mall and an overgrown, vacant lot. The location wasn't ideal, but I needed the money. It was the kind of place where you get 5 customers an hour after midnight, if that. Mostly truckers, late-night stragglers, and the occasional teen daring each other to do stupid things in the parking lot. But that morning, September 19th, 2022, started like any other. I clocked in at 10:55 p.m. the night before, and everything was normal. Sort of. The forecast had called for light overnight rain, but by 3 a.m., it was an outright thunderstorm. You could feel it coming through the walls like a heartbeat. My coworker, Alina, had called out last minute because her kid was sick, so I was running the place alone, which wasn't unheard of. The manager, a guy named Ron Bell, barely followed regulations. He cared more about keeping the health inspector off his back than following safety procedures. At around 4:20 a.m., the storm got weird. The wind was sharp, not howling, but cutting, like it was peeling something off the building. I could hear a strange metal-on-metal groaning sound coming from the back near the alley where the dumpsters were. I figured the wind had blown something loose. I stepped outside to check, but visibility was low. Rain smacked me sideways like it was angry. I squinted toward the end of the alley where our outhouse was. Yes, an outhouse. I know that sounds ridiculous for a Dunkin' Donuts in 2022, but the indoor plumbing in our building had been down for months. Clogged sewer line, something about tree roots. Ron put a makeshift Porta-John-style shack out back. It wasn't a proper plastic one either. Just a rotting wooden shed with a deep concrete drop beneath it. A septic vault or cesspit that predated the building itself. "Don't worry," Ron had told us. "It's safe, just don't use it when it's storming." That's the thing, he knew it wasn't. But we used it anyway. What other option did we have? And that morning, that's when it happened. At 4:43 a.m., a white SUV pulled into the lot. I was behind the counter restocking the napkins when the bell above the door dinged. A group of high school girls came in, 5 of them. I remember because it struck me as odd, them being out so early. They were all soaked and giggling the way you do when you're trying to ignore how uncomfortable you are. One of them, a tall girl with dyed red hair and a pink sweatshirt, came straight to the counter. "Bathroom?" she asked, brushing wet hair from her eyes. I glanced over my shoulder, then back at her. "Sorry, it's out back." Her face twisted. "Out back? We don't have indoor plumbing right now. The outhouse is to the left of the dumpster. Kinda looks like a shed. Bring a phone light." "It's dark." They all exchanged looks, then shuffled back out into the storm without ordering anything. I watched them through the window as they moved toward the back of the store, huddled like penguins against the wind. That groaning metal sound returned, and I swear the whole back corner of the building creaked like it shifted slightly. I got this terrible feeling then, like something ancient had just shifted in the soil beneath the store, but I told myself to shake it off. 15 minutes passed. I started wiping down the countertop trying to stay awake. That's when I heard the first scream. It was sharp and quick, cut off mid-breath. I dropped the rag and ran outside, rain soaking through my hoodie immediately. When I reached the alley, all I could see was the warped wooden door to the outhouse swinging open violently, hanging half off its hinge. Then I saw her, one of the girls gripping the frame, her upper body outstretched and shaking. "Help!" she shrieked. "They fell! They fell!" I froze. "What? Who fell?" "They fell in! The floor's gone!" I ran to the door and looked down. What I saw... I still don't have the right words. The entire floor of the outhouse had collapsed into the vault below. A pit at least 8 feet deep, filled halfway with rainwater and sewage. 4 girls were down there, screaming, clawing at the concrete walls slick with filth, some trying to climb the beams that were still angled downward like snapped bones. One girl was already submerged up to her neck, her hands grasping wildly at floating debris. "Hang on, don't move!" I yelled, backing away and nearly slipping. I bolted around the side of the building and grabbed the mop handle and extension cord from the supply closet. tying the cord to the stick like some makeshift lifeline. When I got back, two of the girls in the pit were fighting each other, not out of hatred, but out of panic. One tried to climb the other's back, causing them both to slip beneath the surface. Screaming and gurgling echoed against the concrete. "Oh, God!" The girl still hanging at the door sobbed. "Do something!" I dropped to my knees and reached the pole down, yelling at them to grab it. One of the girls, smaller, maybe 14, clutched the stick with everything she had. I pulled until my shoulders burned, slipping in the muck, rain still falling hard around me. Her face emerged first, wide-eyed and soaked in waste. She gasped, like she was coming back from the dead. I pulled her up just enough that another girl still hanging by the door helped drag her to safety. I went back for the others. The smell, the sound, the screams had turned to moans, some of them gasping, "Mama, please!" in the dark. I couldn't see how many were still alive. I ran back inside and called 911. They said responders were delayed due to the storm and road flooding. That was when I realized it was just me. Me, and a hole full of girls trying not to die in filth. I sprinted across the street to Gerald's auto, knowing he sometimes came in early. He was there, thank God, unlocking the side entrance. I grabbed him and didn't explain, just pulled him into the storm. Between the two of us, we managed to lower a tow strap down into the pit. Another girl clutched it weakly. She was trying to pull another with her, but the second girl wasn't moving, not even blinking. "We have to get the living ones first," Gerald said, choking on the stench. I didn't want to admit it, but he was right. One by one, we pulled them up. They were covered in blood, feces, and rainwater, and most were too weak to speak. One girl vomited the moment she hit fresh air. Another passed out cold. When paramedics arrived 40 minutes later, two girls were still down there. I helped them lower a proper ladder into the vault. They recovered one more, barely breathing, but alive. The fifth. They found her body floating face down in the corner of the cesspit. She was 16. Her name was Mayra Delgado. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. The nightmares weren't about the pit or the smell or even the screams. They were about Mayra's face, blank and peaceful, like she'd accepted it. The owner, Ron, tried to shift blame, of course, said the girls shouldn't have been out there, claimed he told them not to use it in storms. But we all knew that outhouse had been rotting for months. The foundation had visible cracks. The smell had gotten worse every week. An investigation followed. The county health department shut down our Dunkin for code violations. Ron lost his license. I moved out of Bridgeley Hollow by October, got a job at a gas station in another small town, and eventually things started to feel normal again. But every time it rains hard and I hear a creaking sound outside, I smell it. I hear Mayra's voice, I see the pit, I see the... I never thought a tradition as simple as picking out pumpkins with someone you love could end up breaking you. I'm 25 now, but this happened last fall. My name's Ethan, and at the time I was working full-time at a Dunkin' Donuts just outside a small town called Vernon Ridge, Tennessee, about 20 minutes from where I grew up. It wasn't exactly a dream job, but I needed the money, and it helped me keep the bills paid while I took online classes. I was living with my girlfriend, Marissa, and we'd been together for almost 3 years. She was the planner, the organizer, the one who never missed a season or a reason to do something festive. Pumpkin carving had always been her thing. She loved autumn, like borderline obsessed. She'd start decorating the apartment by mid-September. I'm talking fake leaves, cinnamon candles, pumpkin spice everything. So every year, around the first or second week of October, we'd drive out to a local pumpkin patch and pick a couple of good ones to carve. That year, we decided to go back to the place we'd gone the year before, an old patch behind a rural Dunkin' off State Route 19. It was a weird combo, sure, Dunkin' Donuts and pumpkins, but it actually worked. The Dunkin' was built next to this huge open field that sloped down toward a patch of woods. The field was privately owned by the couple who lived in the small farmhouse behind it. I think their names were Glenn and Marcy or something. Older folks. Super sweet. The first time we went, they had folding tables out front with cider and free donuts, and it was so quiet out there. We said we'd come back every year. This time we went on a Thursday evening just like last year. I got off work at 5, and we headed straight there. The sun was dipping, but there was still light when we pulled in. There was only one other car parked near the farmhouse, a beat-up silver sedan, and it looked abandoned. The Dunkin was still open, a couple teenagers working the closing shift, and one of them waved at us as we walked past. I waved back, then followed Marissa toward the pumpkin field. There were no signs, no fences, just the same wide field dotted with pumpkins and vines, bordered by thick trees on the far side. The old couple stood near the start of the patch, just outside their house. They didn't have a cider table this time, and something about that felt off. But Glenn gave a small wave as we walked up. His hand stayed raised too long, though, like a weird pause in a movie. I nodded at him and smiled politely. Marcy didn't smile at all. "Still open?" Marissa asked. Marcy nodded slowly. "We don't close," she said, her voice just barely above a whisper. I glanced at Marissa. She looked just as unsure as I felt, but shrugged. "Well, let's go find a perfect one," she said, grabbing my hand. Toward the front of the field, most of the pumpkins were either already picked or halfway rotten, soft on one side or caved in. But the deeper we walked into the patch, the more pristine they got. It was strange, actually, like the good ones were intentionally far away. Marissa got excited, snapping pictures on her phone, laughing whenever she found one that was even close to the right shape. Me? I was just glad she was happy. She'd had a rough month, lost her job a few weeks back and was trying to stay upbeat. So I let her lead the way, even when we reached the far edge of the field near the woods. There was a slight curve in the field, a kind of natural hollow that blocked the view from the house and Dunkin. It felt tucked away, hidden. That's when we found the perfect section. Fat, unblemished pumpkins, dozens of them. Marissa knelt down, brushing dirt from one like she'd found treasure. "This is it," she grinned. I knelt beside her, examining a second one. "These look too good, honestly." She chuckled. "They're just pumpkins, babe." But it didn't sit right. No bugs, no bite marks, no sagging vines, just clean, perfect pumpkins nestled in earth that looked undisturbed, pristine. I stood up and looked toward the woods, just a few feet beyond the last row of pumpkins. The trees were dense, tall pines and gnarled oaks that blocked out the last light of the sun. Then I saw them. Half hidden behind one of the trees, on the other side of the clearing, were Glenn and Marcy. Just standing there. Not talking, not walking, just watching us. They stood side by side, their hands by their sides. Marcy's mouth was fixed in a wide smile, too wide. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking. Glenn's face didn't move at all. I stared at them for what felt like a full minute before saying, "Hey, hello?" They didn't respond. They didn't even flinch. Marissa stood up beside me and followed my gaze. "What the hell?" she muttered. And then, just as slowly as they'd appeared, Glenn and Marcy stepped backward, disappearing behind the tree. I grabbed Marissa's hand. Nope, we're leaving." We picked up the 2 pumpkins we'd already chosen and started walking quickly back up the hill toward the house and parking lot. The field suddenly felt a whole lot bigger and quieter. The air was still. No wind, no bugs, no sound. When we reached the top of the hill, I looked back once. The woods were empty. The couple was gone. Back near the farmhouse, the silver sedan was still parked where it had been, but the porch light was off now. The front door, which had been open when we arrived, was closed. Not locked, just closed. Quiet. We dropped the pumpkins near the Dunkin sidewalk and headed straight for my car. As I fumbled with the keys, I noticed the teenager inside the Dunkin staring out at us. He looked nervous, like he wanted to say something but didn't. I hesitated, then walked up to the door and opened it. "Hey," I said, "can I ask you something?" The kid, probably 16, glanced toward the field. "You came for the pumpkins?" "Yeah, the older couple who run it, Glenn and Marcy." He shook his head. I've only worked here a couple months. I thought that field was abandoned. Mr. Glenn died like a year ago. Heart attack. They haven't opened it since." I blinked. "No, they were there. Both of them." He stared at me. "No, man, I swear. That field's been empty for a year." I didn't say anything, just turned and walked out. We drove home in silence. The pumpkins we left behind stayed there. We never went back. Later that night, Marissa showed me the photo she'd taken, trying to prove to herself that we hadn't imagined it. The first few were fine. Smiling selfies, pumpkin close-ups. But the last photo on her phone, taken near the tree line, had something in